Hello, welcome back to the Alexis Brooks Nutrition Channel where we talk all things about periods and gut and a lot about endo. So again, my name is Alexis Brooks. I am a registered dietitian and I myself have endometriosis, so I definitely get it. And today what our topic is about the gut endo connection. So there is a real connection between having endometriosis and gut health and what's just in general going on with your gut. So all the chaos that you might be experiencing with digestion, whether that be bloating, endobelly, cramping after eating, constipation, diarrhea, kind of a mix of some of those things. That's what we're getting into is those symptoms, why they even exist, and how to approach them with a root cause approach. So let's get into it. So first, let's talk a little bit more about like what's actually happening. And I think this is something that is missed really often, where when we talk about endometriosis, we talk often about it being a period problem, a reproductive problem, a hormone problem. But the reality is that endometriosis is a complex condition and it doesn't just impact one system of the body. So um, we can't just hone in on one specific aspect of endometriosis if we really truly want to understand it and approach it with a root cause and holistic approach. So, something to know about endometriosis is that it is a chronic inflammatory condition. And the reason why I bring this up because it has real implications when it comes to the gut. For example, when we are inflamed, as we are with endometriosis, that chronic inflammation, it doesn't just stay in the pelvis. It's not just like, tucking away really neatly in one area. It actually creates systemic inflammation, which is why some of the symptoms too, aside from like the gut issues that we experience, are also things that have nothing to do with the gut. Why we might have joint pain, for example. It's systemic inflammation throughout the body. But it does definitely have implications on the gut. And that inflammation, when it's hitting the gut, here's kind of what's going on. So first, that inflammation, it begins to degrade and damage the gut lining. So our gut lining is no longer healthy. When that gut lining is not healthy and intact, we have something called leaky gut. Maybe you've heard of before, where we have the contents of your stomach that end up, or your digestive tract that end up in your bloodstreams, and your body reacts to that. This can also lead to having an imbalance of good and bad bacteria. So now we have some direct things that are happening with our gut as a result of inflammation. So yeah, that damage is happening to the lining. We then have an imbalance of good and bad bacteria, and so it's an overall disruption in our gut. When we have this disruption, we also see changes in motility. So that's just a word that means the speed of which of how fast your gut is moving. So it can actually slow down how fast your gut is moving in processing food. So with it being slower, that leads to that constipation, right? Constipation leads to the bloating, and also the fermentation. So all those little bacteria that should have been like passed along throughout the rest of the digestive tract, they're kind of hanging out for a longer time than normal, which they then begin to ferment and have their own metabolic processes, and that leads us to feeling gassy too. So, and we often know when it comes to the bloating and the gas, it's not just like uncomfortable. It tends to also be a pretty painful symptom too, especially if the bloating or the gas is more severe too. So that's kind of what's happening in the background of that chronic inflammation specific to the gut. So you may have tried in the past cutting out dairy, cutting out gluten, maybe you became vegetarian or vegan, something along those lines, but that didn't help. Or maybe it did help, but it was a minimal benefit that you experienced and not enough to like really make you feel like you're moving in the right track. And the problem with this is with removing foods without a strategy is, for one, we're not actually addressing the root cause. So food isn't actually the problem. The problem is what's going on with the gut. The problem is that inflammation. It's the the damage to the gut lining. It's the imbalance of the good and bad bacteria. It's not the food itself, but food can make it worse. So it's like a problem that already is existing. We're just adding more fuel to that fire. So that's why you might notice something mildly, like mild relief from it, but it doesn't actually feel like it's taken away the gassiness, the bloating, the diarrhea, the constipation, like all that stuff. Um, and something that I always bring up too when we talk about eliminating or removing foods from our diet is how much stress that can cause of wondering if can I have this food? Can I not have this food? Can I go with my friends? Can I eat at this restaurant? Can I is this too much of this thing? Or reading labels, which I think is a helpful skill to have, but like reading labels under the pretense of being like nervous or anxious about a particular food and we can almost get into the mindset where we feel like we're like starving because everything that we look at it feels like we just can't have and that removes the pleasure of eating in life too. It affects our quality of life too. um, but when we're stressed, even if it's something stressing about that, like stressing about can we eat this food and what's going to happen if I eat it, we're producing cortisol. So we're increasing our cortisol, which is also, it's a stress hormone. And cortisol can slow down our gut function too. So yeah, it's causing an issue. It's making an issue worse, that an issue that we already have, making even more of an issue. So that is not a great thing to do, especially without strategy. There is a time and place of like removing certain foods and trialing and that sort of thing, but we want to make sure that we have a solid strategy around doing something like that. So this is something else I want to bring in because we do talk about hormones with endometriosis, and it is still a really important aspect. We just don't want to look at hormones in isolation with endometriosis. So something to understand is that there is a connection between the gut and it actually impacts how our body um, it impacts how estrogen is metabolized and broken down. So for example, if we don't have a good variety of bacteria, if we don't have healthy populations of bacteria within our gut, it's also not going to be able to do its job really well to get estrogen out of our body. So just to kind of like add that link in there is that we know that estrogen in high amounts and also improper detoxification of estrogen can definitely fuel endometriosis. So it can lead to more of the lesion growth and all the symptoms that we might experience with endometriosis. So we want to make sure that we have like a really solid gut health and like bacteria to be able to help this process. Otherwise, what will happen is that estrogen will recirculate back into our system, and it can lead to having higher levels of estrogen. So that's a important connection that we need to know about is the hormone, the gut, and endometriosis. So having higher estrogen, as I mentioned, it does fuel endo, but it also means that there's more of that lesion activity, more inflammation, more pain, and then it becomes like a loop, right? Because we talked at the very beginning about how more inflammation, how that damages the gut, how it impacts how our gut is working. So if we also have high estrogen levels, it feeds into this loop where it's now we've got the high estrogen, which is leading to the chronic inflammation, the damage of the gut lining, the imbalance of the bacteria, and then now it's disrupting how our body can metabolize estrogen, and then the estrogen is feeding into the endo. So it's like this loop that continues. Really important that we are paying attention to all pieces of this picture. So what a root cause approach looks like is actually what I do in my group program with endometriosis. So the Endo Code Reset, that's a 12-week program. We really dive into the gut. We also talk about hormones, the nervous system, the immune system. We talk about inflammation, all these things that are interrelated when it comes to endo. And we do focus initially on the gut. Like we're not just right out the gate, cutting out a bunch of foods, we're actually assessing what's going on. We do a test that looks at the gut bacteria, the inflammation markers, the gut lining, the integrity of the gut, and we're getting like real data so that we can um, make decisions and put together a plan that is specific and personalized for each person. And then from there, we work in different phases. We then begin to um, work on addressing the inflammation, healing the gut, supporting the microbiome, and then helping out with supporting the hormones so that estrogen balance and estrogen detoxification is able to happen in a healthy way. So we're bringing in this targeted approach with nutrition and overall lifestyle to all these things play a role. So I know that a lot of you have probably been given the diagnosis of IBS, told that you have it, or you've seen descriptions before of IBS and you're like, oh yeah, like that's what I have. Like I'm constipated all the time, or I've had diarrhea all the time, or I've got a mixture of like sometimes I'm constipated, sometimes I have diarrhea. But what I want you to know is that the approach, um, even though the symptoms are similar, the approach with these symptoms are a little bit different with someone with endometriosis because it has a different root cause. And as we mentioned a few times in this video, is that a big part of that root cause is that inflammation, those inflammatory markers and processes that are happening all the time, right? It's always happening in the background if we have endometriosis. So that's a big one. Okay, so if you are experiencing these symptoms, if you have the gas, the bloating, the constipation, the diarrhea, the unpredictable digestive symptoms, and you want to get a better idea of what's going on and what that connection is with endometriosis, you can feel free to book a free consult with me. It's a hormone navigating session you'll find on my website. It's a free 45-minute consult. We'll talk about what is going on, like what's some key factors, identify some key triggers for you, and root causes, and then we'll talk about what a plan will look like for you to be able to move forward and feel better in your body. So if you're looking for that free consult, you'll find a link to it below. And also, just so that you know, it is www.alexisbrooksnutrition / book a call. So that's where you'll be able to book that free call. If you found this video helpful, please save it, share it with someone that you know has endo or suspects they have endo or has some gut related issues. We'd love for you to be able to pass that message along so that they can also get that information and better understand what some of those links are with endometriosis. Alrighty, I will see you in the next one.